Welcome to the Crow's Tavern. Tonight, we'll journey back to the time of the Norse people, exploring their villages, customs, and daily lives as we drift toward peaceful sleep together. After our story ends, you'll hear the gentle sounds of a crackling fire that will continue for hours without interruption. These soothing sounds will help guide you into a deep and restful sleep. Now let us begin our journey into the Viking world and allow the ancient tales to carry you towards slumber. The winter wind howled across the northern plains, carrying with it flurries of snow that danced and swirled like spectral figures in the fading twilight. Ancient pines stood sentinel at the forest's edge, their needled branches heavy with frost that sparkled in the last remnants of daylight. The air held the crisp, clean scent of winter, a purity that cleansed the lungs and cleared the mind, preparing it for contemplation of matters beyond the ordinary. Kari stood at the edge of the ancient forest, his weathered face turned toward the darkening horizon. The leather of his traveling cloak creaked softly as he adjusted the provisions strapped to his bag. Enough for the journey ahead, though where he traveled, mortal sustenance would eventually become meaningless. The weight of his small possessions felt comforting against his shoulders, a final connection to the tangible world he would soon leave behind, if only temporarily. Behind him lay the village where he had spent most of his 70 winters. Smoke rising from stone hearths, the distant sounds of evening activities filtering through the still air. Children being called in for supper, woodcutters returning with their final loads before nightfall, the blacksmith's hammer falling silent as work gave way to rest. Ordinary sounds of life continuing its measured pace, oblivious to one old man's extraordinary journey. He had lived a long life by the standards of his people, seen the births of grandchildren, buried a wife and 2 sons taken by fever, survived 3 wars and countless raids. The silver streaking his once red beard had been earned through decades of hardship and moments of joy alike. His hands, now gnarled like ancient oak roots, had once wielded sword and axe with renowned skill, had cradled newborn children with surprising gentleness, had built homes and boats and carved intricate designs that still adorned the mead hall's supporting pillars. Those same hands now showed the blue veins prominent beneath thin skin, a map of rivers leading toward life's final shore. His eyes, still clear and grey as northern skies, had witnessed the rise and fall of chieftains, the changing of seasons across 7 decades, the small daily miracles that the young often overlooked in their rush toward adulthood and glory. Now, as the cold season descended once more upon the land, he felt the familiar ache in his bones, the tightness in his chest that never quite eased anymore. Each breath in the frigid air came with greater effort than the last, and sleep visited less frequently with each passing night. The village healer, a woman half his age yet wise beyond her years in the ways of herbs and poultices, had spoken in hushed tones with his daughter, words not meant for his ears but heard nonetheless. Another winter would likely claim him. Rather than wait for that inevitable night, when breath would grow shallow and finally cease, Kari had chosen a different path. If death approached, he would meet it on his feet, with purpose rather than resignation, not to challenge or escape his fate. He was too wise for such foolishness, but to understand it, to see with living eyes what awaited beyond the final threshold. The road to Helheim is not meant for the living, the old Volva had warned when he sought her wisdom. Her blind eyes had seemed to look through him, past flesh and bone, to the determination that had taken root in his heart. But for one who walks willingly and with respect, perhaps passage may be granted. Seek the hollow beneath the great ash where 3 roots meet above a spring of darkest water. Begin your descent at moonrise when the barrier between worlds grows thin. Now, standing at the appointed place as the full moon crested the jagged mountains to the east, Kari felt neither fear nor doubt, only a profound certainty. The ancient ash tree loomed above him, its massive trunk splitting into 3 great roots that plunged into the earth, creating a natural archway over a pool of water so still and dark it resembled a mirror of polished obsidian. "I seek passage to the realm below," Kari spoke into the silence, his voice steady despite the weight of his purpose. "Not to cheat death or steal from its kingdom, but to witness and understand what awaits us all." For several heartbeats, nothing changed. The wind continued its mournful song through bare branches, and moonlight glittered on undisturbed snow. Then, slowly, the surface of the dark pool began to ripple, though no breeze disturbed it. The ripples grew stronger, concentric circles spreading outward until the entire pool seemed to vibrate with unseen energy. From its center, a faint glow emerged. Not the warm yellow of fire or the harsh white of lightning, but a cool, bluish luminescence that cast strange shadows against the surrounding trees. The glow intensified, rising from the water like mist given substance, forming a narrow pathway that extended from the bank where Kerry stood down into the depths of the pool itself. Without hesitation, Kari stepped onto this ghostly bridge. It held his weight, though it appeared insubstantial as morning fog. Each step carried him further from the world of the living, deeper into the space between realms. The sounds of the forest wind through branches, distant wolf calls, the crunch of snow beneath boots, faded gradually until only silence remained, broken solely by the rhythm of his breathing and the steady beat of his heart. The path descended, gently at first, then more steeply. The moonlit forest above disappeared from view, replaced by a perfect darkness that should have been impenetrable, yet somehow remained navigable. Kare realized he could see without light, not clearly, but well enough to follow the path as it wound downward in a gentle spiral. This darkness was unlike any he had experienced in the living world. Not merely the absence of light, but something with texture and depth. It seemed almost alive, responding to his presence with subtle shifts and currents like deep water. Occasionally he passed through pockets of varying temperature, some cool as autumn evenings, others carrying the lingering warmth of remembered summers. Strange formations lined the path as he descended deeper, not stalactites or stalagmites as might be found in ordinary caves, but crystalline structures that hummed faintly when he passed, emanating tones just at the threshold of hearing. These formations grew more complex as he continued downward, sometimes resembling familiar objects or beings, before dissolving back into abstract shapes when viewed directly. At one point, the path widened into a small chamber where water dripped from unseen heights above, collecting in a pool so still it resembled black glass. Kari paused here briefly, watching as each droplet created perfect concentric circles that expanded outward before disappearing at the pool's edge. The rhythm of these drops seemed purposeful, almost like the beating of a great, slow heart deep within the earth itself. Time lost meaning in this in-between place. Kari could not have said whether he walked for hours or days. He felt neither hunger nor thirst, though occasionally he paused to take small sips from his water skin out of habit rather than necessity. The air grew neither warmer nor colder, but its quality changed subtly, becoming still and heavy, like the atmosphere before a storm, but without the electric anticipation of lightning. Eventually, the path leveled. Ahead, Kari could perceive a vast open space, the darkness less absolute, illuminated by what appeared to be distant pale lights. As he advanced, these lights resolved into lanterns hanging from high stone arches, flames that burned with a silvery blue radiance, unlike any earthly fire. He had reached the outskirts of Helheim. Unlike the tales told around hearthfires of a realm of suffering and horror, this place possessed a solemn beauty. The ground beneath his feet was neither earth nor stone, but something in between, smooth and slightly yielding like packed sand after rain. Above, no sky was visible, only a vast ceiling of what appeared to be living root systems, massive wooden arteries spreading in complex patterns, occasionally dripping clear water that collected in small, perfectly round pools. Kari followed a wide avenue lined with these soul flame lanterns. On either side stood structures that defied simple description. Not buildings as mortals constructed them, but spaces that seemed formed from the very substance of this underworld. Some resembled great halls with columns of polished black stone. Others appeared as simple cottages wreathed in pale mist, while still others took shapes that human architecture could never achieve, spiraling formations that seemed both solid and fluid simultaneously. Shadowy figures moved among these structures, the dead. Kari realized with a start that contained more wonder than fear. They paid him little attention, though occasionally one would turn toward him with mild curiosity before continuing on their way. These spirits retained human form, but appeared somewhat translucent, like smoke given the memory of flesh. They moved with purpose, but without haste, as if time held no urgency in this place. Some spirits appeared more substantial than others, those recently arrived perhaps, still carrying stronger connections to their physical existence. Others were faint outlines, their features softened by whatever transformative process occurred in this realm over centuries. Yet all maintained a distinct individuality, unique in their movements and manner. Kari observed how they interacted. Some traveled in groups engaged in silent communion, while others moved alone in peaceful solitude. None showed signs of suffering or distress. Rather, they emanated a quiet contentment, a sense of rightness in their current state that contrasted sharply with the fearful tales told of Helheim by those who had never glimpsed its reality. What struck him most was the diversity among them. People of all ages and apparent origins shared this space without division or hierarchy. A child spirit with flowing golden hair played some silent game beside an ancient man whose translucent form bore the markings and garb of distant lands Kari had only heard described by traders. A woman wearing armor reminiscent of styles centuries old walked in companionable silence beside a youth dressed in the manner of neighboring tribes. Death, it seemed, dissolved the boundaries that separated people in life, creating a community unified by their shared transition rather than divided by their differences. As he continued along the avenue, Kari noticed how some spirits tended gardens of strange phosphorescent plants that grew without sunlight, their pale blue and silver leaves responding to touch with gentle waves of luminescence. Others appeared engaged in crafts without physical materials, their hands moving in precise patterns that created ephemeral designs in the air around them, beautiful geometric forms that lingered briefly before dissolving like frost under morning sun. Ahead, at what appeared to be the center of this vast underworld city, rose a structure that dwarfed all others. Eludnir, Kari thought, recalling ancient poems recited by skalds in mead halls. Hell's own palace, where she ruled the quiet kingdom of the dead. Unlike Valhalla's golden splendor or Folkvanger's flowered meadows, Eldudnir was built of darkness-given form, obsidian walls that rose in elegant arches, windows that glowed with the same pale blue light as the lanterns, and massive doors carved from what appeared to be the heartwood of an impossibly ancient tree. As Kari approached these doors, he noticed two figures standing sentinel on either side. Not human spirits these, but massive hounds with fur black as moonless nights and eyes that gleamed with intelligent awareness. Garmar, guardian of Helheim's gates, in duplicate, or perhaps twins, of the same mythic beast. Kari stopped at a respectful distance, then slowly removed his weapons, a simple short sword and eating knife, and placed them on the ground before him. "I come unarmed in peace and respect," he announced, his voice sounding strangely muffled in the still air of Helheim. "I seek audience with the lady of this realm, not to challenge or demand, but to witness and understand." The hounds regarded him silently, making no move either to block his path or to welcome him forward. Then, without sound or visible movement, the great doors began to open inward, revealing a corridor beyond. Taking this as permission to enter, Kari bowed deeply to the guardian beasts and proceeded through the doorway, leaving his weapons behind. The corridor stretched before him, illuminated by more of the soul flame lanterns that cast their gentle blue light across walls of polished stone. The floor beneath his feet was inlaid with intricate patterns in silver and darker materials that seemed to shift slightly as he walked, creating the unsettling impression that the very path responded to his presence. The air here carried a scent he couldn't quite identify, not unpleasant but utterly foreign, like herbs that grew only in this sunless realm. The walls themselves seemed to tell stories. As Kari moved deeper into Eldunir, he noticed that what he had first taken for random patterns in the stone were actually elaborate murals depicting scenes from the Nine Realms. Unlike the heroic battle scenes that decorated the halls of chieftains above, these images captured quieter moments. A farmer surveying fields at dusk, children discovering a nest of fledgling birds, two elders sharing memories beside a fire. Interspersed among these recognizable human experiences were depictions of events beyond mortal understanding. The formation of stars, the birth of mountains, the ancient meeting of fire and ice that first created life according to the oldest myths. The craftsmanship surpassed anything Kari had seen in the living world. The figures seemed almost to breathe, their expressions captured with such delicacy and insight that he felt he might know their thoughts if he studied them long enough. Colors impossible to name shifted across these scenes, suggesting depths of meaning beyond what eyes alone could perceive. At intervals along the corridor stood small alcoves containing objects that appeared to be offerings or memorials. In one, a collection of children's wooden toys arranged in careful patterns. In another, weapons broken or bent as if to symbolize the end of their purpose. In a third, simple items of everyday life. Combs, spindles, cooking implements. Preserved in perfect condition, Kari understood instinctively that these represented aspects of mortal existence, honored here in the realm where such physical tools were no longer needed. Occasionally, the corridor widened into circular chambers where the ceiling rose into darkness too deep for even the blue lanterns to illuminate. In these spaces, the air felt particularly charged with quiet energy, and Kari sensed he was passing through important junctions within Eldunir's complex architecture. The sound of the distant music grew more distinct in these chambers, joined briefly by what might have been voices singing in harmony. so perfect it transcended the need for words. As he advanced deeper into Eldjidnir, Kari became aware of sound for the first time since entering Helheim. A soft melody played on some stringed instrument, haunting in its simplicity. The notes hung in the air like delicate crystals, neither joyful nor mournful, but existing in some emotional space between the two. The corridor widened gradually until it opened into a vast hall that took Kari's breath away. The ceiling soared upward, supported by columns of intertwined stone and wood that resembled the trunks of ancient trees, fossilized in perfect preservation. Between these columns hung tapestries woven from material that seemed to capture and reflect light, depicting scenes not of battle or conquest, but of quiet moments. A mother cradling a child, an old man watching sunset, a pair of lovers beneath a flowering tree, a hunter returning home. The common thread binding these images was their peacefulness, their ordinary beauty. Soul flame lanterns floated freely here, suspended by no visible means, drifting slowly through the air like jellyfish in deep ocean currents. Their light revealed a floor paved with stones of varying darkness, obsidian, onyx, jet, and others Kari could not name, arranged in spiraling patterns that drew the eye inward toward the center of this magnificent space. And there, seated upon a throne that appeared carved from a single massive piece of heartwood, was Hel herself. The goddess of the Underworld defied the crude descriptions Kari had heard throughout his life. She was neither monster nor maiden, but something far more profound, a study in perfect duality. The right side of her form was that of a woman of extraordinary beauty, with skin pale as winter moonlight, features delicate yet strong, her eye clear and piercing. The left side, however, revealed the truth that lay beneath all living flesh. Bloodless and skeletal, the bones visible beneath translucent skin. The eye in this half of her face, a deep well of darkness, flecked with distant stars. Her gown flowed around her like liquid shadow, pooling on the dais that elevated her throne slightly above the hall's floor. Upon her head rested a crown fashioned from silver branches, intertwined with what appeared to be preserved roots, creating a complex circlet that caught the blue light in surprising ways. Beside the throne lay another guardian hound, larger than those at the entrance, its massive head resting on enormous paws. One of its eyes reflected the soul flame light. The other was milky white and sightless. Like its mistress, the beast embodied the meeting of life and death in single form. Kari approached slowly, his footsteps echoing softly in the vast space. When he had come within what felt a respectful distance, he knelt on one knee and bowed his head. "Lady of Helheim," he spoke, his voice steady despite the awe filling his chest. "I thank you for granting me entrance to your realm. I am Kari Thorvaldsson, and I come seeking neither favor nor escape from fate, but understanding of what awaits us all." For several heartbeats, silence held the hall. Then came a voice unlike any Kari had heard in the world above, low and melodious, yet with an underlying resonance that seemed to vibrate through bone rather than air. "Rise, Kari Thorvaldsson, and approach," Hel commanded, though her tone carried no harshness. "Few living souls seek my halls willingly, and fewer still come with respect rather than desperation. Your courage grants you audience." Kari rose and stepped forward until he stood directly before the dais. From this closer vantage, he could see that Hel's throne was not merely carved, but alive in some indefinable way. The wood grain shifted subtly like slow-flowing water. and what he had taken for decorative elements were actually intricate runes that glowed faintly from within. "You seek understanding," Hel continued, studying him with her mismatched eyes. "Yet understanding cannot be given like bread or mead. It must be earned through exchange. Are you willing to answer truthfully what I ask before receiving what you seek?" "BM, lady," Kari replied without hesitation. Hel's expression, half serene beauty, half eternal grimace, remained unchanged, yet something in her manner suggested approval. "Then tell me first, why do you not fear me, as most mortals do? I sense caution in you, proper respect, but not the terror that usually accompanies mortal thoughts of death." Kari considered the question carefully before answering. "I have walked alongside death throughout my life, lady. I have seen it take form in battlefield and sickbed alike. What I feared was never death itself, but dying without purpose or understanding. The unknown breeds fear, and so I have come to make the unknown known, at least to my own heart." A sound like distant wind through winter branches might have been Hel's version of thoughtful acknowledgement. "And what of those you left behind? Do you not fear the grief your chosen journey brings them?" This question struck closer to Kari's heart, and he felt a tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with his aging body. "My daughter knows I go to meet what approaches regardless. Better to face it standing than waiting for it to claim me in my sleep. She has her children, her strong husband. Their grief will come whether I wait passively or seek actively." He paused, then added with complete honesty, "Though, yes, I feel the weight of their coming sorrow and carry it with me." The goddess nodded slightly, the movement causing the shadows across her face to shift in fascinating patterns. "Honesty serves you well here, where little else from the living world holds power." She leaned forward slightly, both eyes, one living, one dead, fixed intently upon him. "Final question, mortal. What do you believe awaits beyond death that you journey so far to glimpse it?" This, Kari realized, was the true heart of his quest, exposed by Hel's piercing inquiry. He had traveled physically to Helheim, yet the greater journey had been internal, confronting this question that haunted all living beings. "I believe," he began slowly, choosing each word with care, "that death is not ending but transformation, not reward or punishment but continuation in altered form. I believe the essence of who we are, our deeds, memories, the love we gave and received, persists beyond the body's failing." He met Hel's gaze directly. "I believe death is a doorway, not a wall, and I have come to see what lies beyond the threshold before I must cross it permanently." For the first time, Hel's expression changed, the living half of her mouth curving in what might have been a smile, while the skeletal half remained unchanged. The effect was oddly harmonious, rather than disturbing. "Well answered," she said, and Kari thought he detected a note of something almost like warmth in her otherworldly voice. "Now, having given truth, you may receive it. What specific understanding do you seek from the realm of the dead?" Kari had rehearsed this question during his long journey downward, refining it with each step that brought him closer to this moment. "I wish to know if death brings peace to those who lived with regret and pain. I wish to know if the bonds forged in life, between parent and child, between friends, between those who loved deeply, remain meaningful beyond the veil. And I wish to know if consciousness persists, if we remember who we were, or if all is washed away when we enter your domain." Hel considered him for a long moment, the hall around them utterly silent, save for the occasional soft notes from the unseen musician somewhere in the shadows. Even the great hound beside her throne seemed to hold its breath, watching the exchange with intelligent eyes. Complex questions, she finally replied, yet simpler than you might believe. Come. She rose from her throne in a fluid motion, her gown flowing around her like water in moonlight. She gestured for him to follow as she descended the dais steps. Words alone cannot provide the understanding you seek. You must witness. Uddy followed the goddess as she moved across the great hall toward a section he had not noticed before. An alcove where the wall appeared to be not stone or wood, but shimmering, translucent material, like silk suspended in still air. As they approached, this veil-like barrier rippled gently. Here, Hel said, stopping before the strange wall. The boundary between awareness and memory grows thin. Look deeply and see your answer. Gari stepped forward as instructed, his eyes focusing on the shimmering surface. At first, he saw only vague shadows and shifting patterns of light. Then, gradually, images began to form, not projected upon the veil, but somehow existing within it, as if the barrier itself contained worlds within its translucent depth. He saw figures he recognized, friends long dead, his sons taken by fever years before, his wife, whose absence still ached in his heart daily. They moved through settings that seemed neither wholly of the living world nor completely foreign, familiar landscapes subtly altered, buildings remembered but slightly transformed. Most striking was not their appearance but their manner. Each spirit moved with purpose and awareness, engaging with others, expressing emotions that ranged from quiet joy to thoughtful reflection. Deep memory, Kari whispered, his voice thick with emotion. They know themselves. Yes, Hel confirmed, standing beside him, her dual nature somehow less shocking now that he had spent time in her presence. Death takes the body and transforms the spirit, but it does not erase identity. Those who enter my realm bring with them all they were, their memories, their loves, their essence. What they leave behind is pain, illness, the limitations of physical form, and the sharp edges of mortal suffering. As she spoke, the scenes within the veil shifted. Kari saw his wife greeting his sons, not with the desperate grief of their parting in life, but with the serene joy of reunion beyond suffering. He watched as old enemies sat in conversation, the hatreds that had divided them in life, dissolved by the perspective that death had granted them. And regret? He asked, unable to tear his gaze from these visions. Do they carry that burden still? Regret transforms here, Hel replied, her voice gentle despite its otherworldly quality. Not forgotten. Nothing true is ever truly forgotten, but understood differently. From this side of existence, the patterns of life become visible in ways the living cannot perceive. What seemed failure reveals itself as necessary growth. What appeared as loss shows itself as transformation. Regret becomes wisdom when viewed through death's clarifying lens. The veil rippled again, and Kari saw his own face. Not as he appeared now, aged and weathered, but as he might be after crossing permanently into Hel's domain. This spectral version of himself walked among the dead with recognition and purpose, greeting those he had loved, engaging with others he had never met in life. There was peace in this future self's expression, but not the empty peace of oblivion, rather the rich peace of continuation and understanding. And the bonds between souls? Kari asked, his final question hanging between them as the visions continued to shift and flow. In answer, Hel raised her hand. The living hand, not the skeletal one, and passed it before the veil. The images changed again, now showing connections between the spirits. Lines of golden light that linked some souls closely, others more distantly, creating a vast web of relationships that extended beyond what his eyes could follow. Love does not end, Hel stated simply, nor friendship, nor the bonds of family. They change form, as all things must when crossing between realms, but their essence remains, sometimes stronger in fact, without the distractions and limitations of physical existence to obscure their true nature. Kari watched, transfixed, as the web of connections pulsed and flowed like a living thing, revealing patterns of relationship he could barely comprehend. He saw how souls who had loved deeply in life remained connected even when separated by centuries of time as mortals measured it. He witnessed how those who had influenced each other, for good or ill, remained in relationship, not bound by obligation, but connected through the consequences of their interaction. "It is beautiful," he said finally, when the visions began to fade and the veil returned to its shimmering, indistinct state. "Not at all what the tales describe." Hel's expression shifted again, not quite a smile, but a softening. Tales serve their purpose for the living. Fear of death keeps mortals from squandering the gift of life. Yet fear distorts truth, and in your myths, much is lost in translation between realms. She turned away from the veil, gesturing for Kari to follow her back toward the center of the great hall. As they walked, shadows moved across the floor like gentle waves, and the soul flame lanterns drifted around them in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. "You have seen more than most living eyes are permitted," Hel said as they reached the open space before her throne. "Does this satisfy your quest for understanding?" Kari considered the question deeply. The visions had indeed shown him much, confirmed some of his hopes, challenged some assumptions, opened new questions he hadn't thought to ask. Yet beneath it all ran a current of peace he hadn't anticipated. "It does, lady," he replied with genuine gratitude. "You have shown me that death is not to be feared, though life remains precious. You have shown me that what matters most, connection, love, growth, continues beyond the threshold. This is the understanding I sought." Hel nodded, and for a brief moment, both sides of her face seemed to align in an expression of approval. "Then our exchange is complete. You have answered my questions with truth, and I have granted the understanding you sought." She returned to her throne, settling upon it with fluid grace. "Now you must return to the realm of the living, to live whatever time remains to you with this knowledge in your heart." Kari felt a momentary pang of reluctance. Part of him wished to remain longer, to explore this realm of quiet dignity, to perhaps speak with those he had glimpsed in the visions. But he understood that his time here was necessarily limited. He had been granted a visitor's passage, not a permanent place. "How shall I find my way back?" he asked, realizing he had no clear memory of the route through Eludnir's complex corridors. "Garma will guide you," Hel replied, gesturing to the great hound beside her throne. The beast rose at its mistress's signal, stretching massive limbs before patting down from the dais to stand before Kari. "Follow him to the boundaries, and the path that brought you here will lead you home." Kari bowed deeply, one hand over his heart in sincere respect. "I thank you for your generosity and wisdom, Lady of Helheim. I will carry what I have learned back to the living world." "Came final gift," Hel said as he straightened. "When your time truly comes, when you return here not as visitor, but as resident, You need not fear the journey. You will be recognized, and passage will be smooth. This simple assurance touched Kari deeply, not an extension of life or special treatment in death, but the promise of recognition and welcome when his natural time arrived. It was, he realized, exactly the right gift. Respecting both the inevitability of his eventual return and the significance of his brave journey. Until then, he responded with another slight bow. Hel inclined her head in acknowledgement, and Kari turned to follow Garma, who waited patiently, mismatched eyes, one bright, one clouded, fixed on him with intelligence that seemed far beyond that of ordinary beasts. The journey outward through Elginir's halls felt both similar to and different from his entrance. The corridors seemed to shift subtly, revealing different architectural wonders and displays of otherworldly art than he had noticed before. Occasionally, spirits moved past them, some acknowledging Kari with curious glances, others focused on their own purposes. None spoke, yet he sensed no hostility in their silence, merely the natural quiet of this realm where words held different weight than among the living. Goma led him unerringly through the complex passageways until they reached the great entrance doors, which opened soundlessly at their approach. Outside, Helheim spread before them, that vast city of the dead, with its curious structures and blue flame lanterns. The hound continued forward, and Kari followed, noting details he had missed during his inward journey. Gardens of pale, luminescent plants that grew without sunlight, gathering places where spirits congregated in silent communion, small shrines or memorials that seemed dedicated to concepts rather than deities. They traveled the main avenue in reverse, eventually reaching the outskirts of the Underworld city where the structured environment gave way to a landscape more like a natural cavern system. Here, Garum stopped and turned to face Kari, those mismatched eyes studying him one final time. "Thank you for your guidance," Kari said, feeling it right to acknowledge the creature directly. The hound made no sound but dipped its massive head in what appeared to be recognition of the gratitude. Then it turned and padded back toward Elginir, disappearing into the blue-lit mists before Kari had taken more than a few steps toward the ascending path. The journey upward proved different from his descent. Where before he had walked a gradually spiraling path through darkness, now he found himself on what appeared to be a straight stairway carved from living stone, illuminated by the same soul flame lanterns that lit Helheim. Each step seemed to carry him further from the profound stillness of the underworld and closer to the sensory richness of living existence. Sounds returned gradually, first just the echo of his own footsteps, then distant whispers that might have been wind or memory, and finally, as he neared the upper world, the familiar sounds of forest at night. Owl calls, the rustle of small creatures through underbrush, the soft sigh of wind through branches. When he finally emerged, it was through the same dark pool from which he had descended. The surface parted for him like a curtain, and he stepped onto the snowy bank, water sliding from his clothing and skin without leaving wetness behind. Above, the same full moon hung in the sky, though it had traveled some distance across the heavens during his absence. Kari drew a deep breath, experiencing the cold winter air with renewed appreciation. It tasted sharper, felt more invigorating than he remembered, as if his time in Helheim had heightened his awareness of the sensory details of living existence. The ache in his joints remained, as did the occasional tightness in his chest, but these physical limitations now seemed less significant when viewed against the backdrop of what he had learned. The path back to his village wound through familiar forest, each landmark a lightning-struck oak, a boulder shaped like a sleeping bear, the stream that ran copper-colored over mineral deposits, appearing simultaneously unchanged and somehow more vivid than before. Kari walked steadily, his aged body moving with purpose born of inner peace rather than desperate determination. By the time the first smoke from village hearths became visible against the pre-dawn sky, Kari had mentally composed what he would tell his daughter, his grandchildren, his friends. Not everything. Some experiences defied complete translation into words, and some truths were better discovered personally than received second-hand, but enough to ease their eventual grief, enough to share the most important understanding he had gained, that death was not ending but transformation, not separation but altered connection. He would tell them of Helheim's quiet beauty, so different from the nightmarish realm described in frightening tales. He would speak of the spirits he had seen, not tormented shadows, but beings continuing their existence with purpose and peace. He would describe Hel herself, neither monster nor maiden, but sovereign of a necessary realm, maintaining the balance that sustains all existence. Most importantly, he would share the vision of connection that transcends physical separation. How bonds of love and friendship remain intact across the threshold between worlds. He would explain how those who pass into Hel's realm carry with them all that truly matters, their memories, their identity, their capacity for growth and understanding. How pain and illness fall away, while essence remains. Kari considered how to express these profound truths in simple language his young grandchildren might grasp. Perhaps he would tell them that death is like the transformation of a caterpillar into a butterfly, not the end of existence, but its continuation in altered, lighter form. For his adult children, he would speak more directly of the peaceful dignity he had witnessed, the ordered harmony of Hel's realm that contrasted so sharply with fearful myths. For the village elders who shared his approaching proximity to life's end, he would offer the most complete account, knowing they would find in it the same comfort he now carried, the knowledge that awaiting them was not oblivion or punishment, but a continuation of consciousness in a realm where wisdom is valued above strength, where understanding replaces striving, where the essence of identity persists while its more painful aspects fall away. To the village's children, gathered around the communal fire on winter evenings, he might offer gentler versions of his journey, not to frighten, but to plant seeds of understanding that would grow as they matured. Stories of Gama's dignified guidance, of spirits tending strange gardens, of Hel's quiet wisdom, tales that would gradually replace fear with respect for death's necessary role in the great cycle. As he approached the outskirts of the village, Kari noticed the first birds beginning their dawn chorus, their songs piercing the quiet with surprising clarity. The eastern horizon showed the first hint of color, not yet sunrise, but its promise. New day, new understanding, continuation rather than conclusion. He had gone seeking wisdom about death. He returned with deeper appreciation for life and the knowledge that when winter finally claimed him, whether this season or another, it would not be an ending, but a return to Hel's realm of quiet dignity, where all journeys continue in altered form and all connections remain, transformed but unbroken. A figure appeared on the path ahead, his daughter, wrapped in furs against the morning chill, her face showing both worry and relief as she recognized him. Kari smiled and quickened his pace slightly to meet her, ready to share what could be shared of his journey into the Hall of Velvet Silence. "Father," she called, rushing forward to embrace him. "We feared when you didn't return." Her voice caught on unspoken fears. "I know," he replied gently, returning her embrace with strength that surprised them both. "But I had a journey I needed to make, and now I have returned, carrying what I sought." She drew back slightly, studying his face with concern. "You look different somehow. Where did you go?" Kari smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it hadn't for many seasons. "I went to meet what awaits us all, daughter, and I found it kinder and more beautiful than the tales would have us believe." Her expression showed confusion mingled with curiosity as they walked together toward home, where hearthfire and family waited. Behind them, the full moon set beyond the western mountains, while ahead, the first golden light of dawn touched the snow-covered fields, transforming them into a sea of gentle radiance. In the shadows between trees, unseen by either father or daughter, a massive hound with mismatched eyes watched their departure. Its task complete, it turned silently and vanished, returning to the hall of quiet dignity where Hela waited, ruling her peaceful realm with the solemn grace that was her birthright and her nature. And in the village below, life continued. Babies cried and were comforted. Young people dreamed of adventures. Elders shared wisdom gathered across decades. Death would come to each in time as it comes to all. But for those who heard Kari's tale in the days that followed, that inevitable journey carried less terror and more wonder than before, for he had walked to the threshold between worlds and returned bearing quiet truth, that beyond the veil waits not oblivion or punishment, but continuation, memories intact, connections preserved, pain transformed into perspective. That Hel herself was neither monster nor maiden, but keeper of necessary transition, guardian of peaceful transformation. That death, like the moon disappearing beyond the horizon, was not extinction, but simply passing from one state of being into another, equally real, equally significant, part of the same great cycle that gives meaning to existence across all the realms of Yggdrasil, the world tree, whose branches cradle both living and dead in eternal, perfect balance. In the weeks that followed, Kari's tale spread beyond his village, carried by travelers and traders to distant settlements across the northern lands. Some dismissed it as the hallucination of an aging mind approaching its end. Others found in it confirmation of hopes they had silently harbored but never voiced. A few recognized in his descriptions echoes of wisdom fragments preserved in ancient songs rarely sung in modern times. The Volva who had first guided him to the hollow beneath the ash tree listened to his account with knowing eyes, adding her own validation when skeptics questioned too harshly. "There are thresholds between worlds," she would remind them, "and occasionally one with the right spirit may cross briefly and return with truth." As winter deepened, Kari found himself changed by his journey in unexpected ways. Though his body continued its natural decline, his spirit seemed to grow more vibrant. He spoke with greater clarity and insight, his words carrying weight even among those who had previously overlooked the contributions of the elderly. Children sought him out for stories, elders for counsel, elders for reassurance about the journey they too would soon undertake. On especially clear nights, when stars gleamed like soul flames against perfect darkness, Kari would sometimes sit alone outside his daughter's home, his gaze turned skyward. In those moments, he could almost perceive the invisible connections binding all existence, the living and the dead, the seen and unseen, past and future, mortal and divine, all threads in the same vast tapestry, all notes in the same eternal song. And when, with the first blooming of spring flowers, Kari's physical journey finally ended, those who had heard his tale gathered not in bitter grief, but in solemn celebration of transition. They spoke of him not as lost, but as transformed, not as gone, but as continued in altered state. They imagined him walking the obsidian halls of Elgidnir, welcomed by Hel herself, recognized as one who had honored her realm with respect and understanding. Thus did one mortal's courage to face the unknown transform fear into wisdom, separation into connection, ending into continuation. A legacy more lasting than stone monuments or heroic songs. A quiet truth passed from heart to heart like the soul flames of Helheim, illumining the darkness with gentle, persistent light. As the last echoes of Kari's tale fade into memory, our journey through Norse mythology continues. We have walked alongside him through Helheim's solemn beauty, witnessed the quiet dignity of Hel herself, and returned with wisdom that transforms our understanding of what lies beyond life's threshold. Now we turn our attention to another boundary between worlds, not the veil between life and death, but the permeable membrane between waking and dreaming. In Norse cosmology, these realms are interconnected branches of Yggdrasil, the world tree, their boundaries more fluid than mortal minds typically perceive. Just as Kari found his way to Helheim through the hollow beneath the ash where three roots meet, our next tale guides us through another hidden passage. Dream's hollow gate stands as another threshold between worlds, a place where consciousness shifts form rather than dissolves, where reality bends without breaking. The soft blue glow of Helheim's soul flame lanterns dims in our mind's eye, giving way to the misty borders of Draumheimer, the dream realm. Here, different laws govern experience. Time flows according to its own rhythm. Memories intertwine with possibilities, and the boundaries between self and other grow transparent. As you drift deeper into relaxation, allow your consciousness to transition between these interconnected tales. Release Kari to his peaceful journey in Hel's quiet realm, and prepare to pass through Dream's hollow gate, where another adventure awaits in the landscapes of Norse mythology. The threads connecting these tales remain unbroken, each exploring how the Norse understood the permeable boundaries between states of being, each offering wisdom about transitions, transformations, and the continuity that exists beneath apparent endings. Let your breath deepen as we prepare to cross this new threshold together. The agreement had been struck, the price paid in full. Hel, daughter of Loki and ruler of the Underworld, stood before her obsidian throne, her form half shadow and half light, as was her nature. Her eyes, one warm as summer skies, one cold as winter's heart, regarded the traveler with a gaze that held neither malice nor kindness, but simply the weight of ancient law. You have walked the 9 paths where few living souls have tread, she spoke, her voice echoing strangely in the cavernous hall of Helheim. You have faced what most flee, and remembered what most forget. The terms of our bargain are satisfied. Her pale hand extended, long fingers unfurling to reveal a small stone that glowed with soft inner light. A soul mima, the talisman that had guided the traveler through the darkness. The hollow gate stands open for your return, but remember, what passes between worlds changes in the crossing. The knowledge you carry will shape itself to dreams upon your awakening. The traveler accepted the stone with reverence, feeling its gentle warmth against calloused palms. The journey had been long, through Niflheim's bitter mists, across the roots of Yggdrasil where serpents gnawed, and finally into the somber halls of Helheim itself. What had begun as a desperate quest for wisdom had transformed into something else entirely, something that could not be named, but only felt, as a profound shifting within. Hel's mismatched gaze lingered a moment longer before she turned away, her dark cloak sweeping the stone floor as she moved back toward her throne. The path home awaits. Dawn approaches in the world above. If you would see it again, you must depart now. The traveler bowed deeply, no words necessary between them now. What needed to be said had been spoken in the heart of their bargain days. Or was it weeks? Earlier, time flowed differently in these deep places beneath the world. With the soul bay monad clutched tightly, the traveler turned toward the archway at the far end of the hall, an opening carved from living rock, its edges decorated with ancient runes that shifted and changed when looked at directly. The hollow gate, passage between the realms of the dead and the living, between dreams and waking, between what was and what might yet be. The first step toward that distant arch felt heavy, as though invisible chains sought to bind the traveler to this realm of shadows and whispers. This was the nature of Helheim. It did not easily surrender what entered its domain. Yet with each subsequent step, a curious lightness began to grow. The burden of the journey, the weight of knowledge gained and sacrifices made, did not vanish but rather transformed, becoming something that could be carried rather than something that dragged behind. The great hall of hell stretched longer than seemed possible, the distance to the arch expanding with every footfall. This, too, was a final test. Many who reached this point faltered, their resolve weakening as Helheim exerted its subtle pull. To turn back now, to glance over one's shoulder with hesitation, this was how souls were lost, trapped between states of being, neither fully dead nor truly alive. The traveler kept eyes fixed forward, focusing on the arch that seemed to pulse slightly, as if breathing in time with a distant heartbeat. The soul marmor grew warmer in hand, its glow strengthening in proximity to the gate. Around the edges of the path, shadows gathered and whispered, the countless dead who resided in Helheim, watching this rare departure from their eternal abode with curiosity, perhaps envy, perhaps simple wonder. As the arch drew nearer, details emerged that had not been visible from a distance. Carved into its surface were scenes from the 9 worlds. Asgard with its golden halls, Midgard with its seas and mountains, Jotunheim with its towering ice peaks, and others in succession. At the very top, the great world tree Yggdrasil spread its branches across the curve of the stone, its roots plunging downward to form the base of the arch itself. The whispers from the shadows grew more distinct now, becoming words, becoming voices. "Remember us?" came one sigh, like autumn leaves skittering across stone. "Tell them we wait," urged another, this one bringing to mind the creak of ice in spring's first thaw. "The dream was true," insisted a third, reminiscent of wind through summer wheat. The traveler paused at the threshold of the arch, feeling the boundary between worlds like a thin membrane, almost tangible against the skin. Here, at this liminal point, the pull of life and death balanced perfectly. One could stand in this exact spot forever, suspended between states of being, neither here nor there. Many had lost themselves in this moment, becoming guardians of the threshold, neither truly dead nor fully alive. It would be simple to remain, to avoid the pain and uncertainty of return. The knowledge gained in these dark halls brought its own burden. The understanding that all things end, that even the gods themselves were bound to their appointed fates, that Ragnarok waited in the mists of time's horizon. Such wisdom was easier to bear in the gentle shadows of Helheim than in the harsh light of the living world. The soul magma pulsed more urgently now, almost hot against the traveller's palm. Its light shone through flesh and bone, illuminating from within like a star held in human hand. This was its purpose, not merely to guide, but to compel return when the moment came. The bargain with Hel included this safeguard, for she knew well how seductive the threshold could be. With resolve renewed, the traveller stepped forward, passing beneath the great arch of the hollow gate. The world shifted, reality folding upon itself like parchment creased by an invisible hand. Light and dark exchanged places, sound became silence, became sound again, and the solid stone beneath gave way to something less substantial, a path of silver mist that wound upward through darkness. The realm beyond the hollow gate was neither Helheim proper, nor yet the world of the living. This was the between place, Dreams Hollow, where departed souls lingered before their final journey, and where dreamers sometimes wandered during deepest sleep. Here, the boundaries between memory and vision blurred, and time itself became fluid and unreliable. The mist path glimmered faintly, illuminated not by sun or torch, but by its own pale luminescence. It twisted upward through a landscape that constantly shifted at the corners of vision, one moment resembling a forest of silver-barked trees, the next a field of stars suspended in void, then perhaps the inside of some great cathedral whose walls stretched beyond sight. The traveller began the ascent, each step lighter than the last as Helheim's gravity loosened its hold. The soul murmur's glow had softened, becoming a gentle pulse that matched the rhythm of breathing. Its purpose was changing now, no longer guiding through darkness, but anchoring to life, to identity, to the self that existed before descent into the underworld. Floating lights appeared in the mist around the path, small star-like points of radiance that drifted on unseen currents. Some moved with purpose, following their own invisible roads through the between place. Others hovered nearly motionless, pulsing gently like heartbeats. These were souls in transition, some newly departed from life and making their way deeper into death's realm, others in the midst of dreams so profound they temporarily walked the borders of existence. One such light drifted closer than the others, circling the traveller in a slow, deliberate pattern. As it neared, it grew larger, its shape becoming less a simple point and more a swirling complexity of light and shadow. The mists around it thinned, and for a moment, a face formed in the luminous patterns. Familiar features, eyes that held recognition. "You succeeded then," said the apparition, its voice neither male nor female, but somewhere in between. Familiar, yet impossible to place. Few return from Hell's dominion with their purpose fulfilled. The traveller nodded, unsure whether this encounter was real or merely another manifestation of Dreams Hollow playing upon memory and desire. The knowledge was there to be found, for those willing to pay its price. The face in the light shifted, features rearranging subtly to reveal another visage, this one clearly recognized. A loved one long passed beyond the veil of death. The ghost of a smile touched transparent lips. "The living are not meant to carry the dead's wisdom," the apparition cautioned, its new voice achingly familiar, stirring emotions long buried. "It changes you. As water changes the stone, it continuously flows over." "I am already changed," the traveler replied, reaching one hand toward the floating light before letting it fall back. Even here, in this between place, some boundaries could not be crossed, but I would not unmake the journey, even knowing its cost. The light pulsed once, the face within it showing something like approval, or perhaps simply acceptance. Then, carry what you have learned gently. The waking world has forgotten much of what you now know. Forgotten by choice, perhaps, rather than by accident. Before the traveler could respond, the apparition began to fade, its light diminishing, features blurring back into formless radiance. "We will meet again," came its final words, already distant, as though spoken across vast distance. "Though you may not remember this promise upon waking." The light rejoined the others, becoming indistinguishable among the countless drifting souls that populated Dream's Hollow. The traveler stood motionless for a moment, hands still half raised in farewell, before continuing the upward journey along the silver path. As the path climbed higher, the mists began to thin, revealing more of this strange landscape. Great roots broke through the silvery ground in places, massive, twisted growths larger than ancient trees, disappearing upward into the haze. These were the deepest roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree that connected all 9 realms of existence. Even in this between place, its presence defined reality, anchoring the very concept of order against the chaos that always threatened to reclaim creation. Between these monumental roots, other structures became visible. Bones of impossible size, remnants of beings that had existed before the coming of gods or men. Some formed natural archways across the path. Others lay half buried in the misty ground like the ribs of some great beast. These were the oldest things in all creation, the framework upon which the 9 worlds had been built, remains of what came before and foundation of what existed now. The traveler passed beneath one such arch of ancient bone, feeling a subtle shift in the air, a changing in the quality of light. The mist thinned further, revealing glimpses of what lay above, a canopy of intersecting roots and branches that formed a natural ceiling, between which could be seen patches of deep purple blue, like twilight sky caught between day and night. The soul maimer's pulse quickened, its rhythm becoming more urgent. The waking world grew closer with each step, the boundary between dream and reality thinning like ice in spring. Soon the transition would come, that momentary disorientation between sleep and wakefulness, between being and becoming. As the path continued its gentle ascent, the traveler noticed curious formations emerging from the mist. Memory pools, they were called in the ancient texts. Small, perfectly circular collections of liquid silver that gathered in depressions along the way. These pools did not reflect the surroundings as normal water might, but instead showed glimpses of other times, other possibilities, other paths not taken. The traveler paused beside one such pool, drawn by a glimmer of recognition. Bending closer, the surface rippled and cleared to reveal not a reflection, but a window into what might have been. The traveler's own form, but in circumstances never experienced, surrounded by people never met, in a place never visited. Was this a path not taken? A life that might have unfolded had different choices been made, or perhaps a glimpse into another existence entirely, a parallel self walking a different branch of Yggdrasil's infinite possibility. The vision shifted, the silver surface rippling as though disturbed by unseen rain. Now it showed fragments of the journey through Helheim, the crossing of the river Gjöll, whose waters flowed with the sorrows of all worlds, the encounter with Modgud, who guarded the bridge and asked riddles of passage, the descent through Niflheim's mists, where lost souls wandered. These were true memories, moments lived and survived, yet seeing them reflected gave them a strange distance, as though they had happened to someone else, or in another lifetime. The traveller straightened, moving away from the memory pool's tempting visions. Such reflections could entrap the unwary, keeping them suspended in contemplation of what was or might have been, until their connection to the present moment dissolved entirely. Many dreamers had been lost this way, their physical bodies awakening empty while their essential selves remained trapped in dreams hollow, endlessly watching reflections of possibility. Other pools appeared along the path, each offering its own unique glimpses, some into the distant past where giants walked freely across newly formed worlds, others into possible futures where the consequences of Ragnarok played out in countless variations. The traveller acknowledged these with respectful glances, but did not pause again, understanding the danger of becoming too entangled in what could not be changed, or what had not yet come to pass. Instead, attention turned to the changing landscape itself. As the path climbed higher, the environment grew more structured, more defined. The shifting mists began to organize themselves into distinct features, banks of cloud that resembled hills, formations like distant mountains, patterns in the haze that suggested forests or lakes when viewed from certain angles. Reality was reasserting itself, preparation for the return to a world of fixed form and physical law. With this increasing definition came colors beyond the silver-grey palette of Dreams Hollow's lower reaches. Gentle hues appeared at first, pale blues in the distance, soft greens where mist forest formed, hints of gold where light caught the edges of cloud formations. These colors strengthened gradually, becoming more vivid with each step upward, as though the world were being painted into existence around the returning traveler. Alongside these visual changes came a gradual increase in sound. The profound silence of Helheim, where nothing lived to make noise and even footsteps fell muffled in the dust of ages, had given way to the subtle ambient sounds of Dreams Hollow, the whispers of passing souls, the soft sigh of mist currents, the almost imperceptible creak of Yggdrasil's roots as they grew. Now these sounds gained companions, a distant rushing that might be wind through leaves or water over stones, rhythmic patterns like heartbeats or breath, occasional clear notes that hinted at birdsong or voices calling from too far away to distinguish words. The traveller absorbed these changes with each sense, recognizing them as signs of approaching the boundary between worlds. The body itself was changing too, becoming more substantial with each step. In Helheim, physical form had been almost an afterthought, a memory of life carried into death's domain. In Dreams Hollow, that form had begun to reassert itself, though still with the fluidity characteristic of dreams. Now, ascending toward the waking world, the traveller felt the gathering weight of true physicality, the pull of gravity, the effort of muscles, the steady rhythm of breath necessary for sustaining life. With these corporeal sensations came others, less expected, but equally powerful. Hunger that spoke of days without food, thirst that reminded of mortality's constant needs, fatigue that suggested the journey had taxed physical reserves beyond normal limits. These were not memories, but present realities, the body awakening to its own condition after the mind's sojourn beyond its boundaries. The path curved around a massive root that erupted from the misty ground like a mountain range, its bark surface carved with runes older than any living language. The traveler ran fingers across these symbols, feeling their power vibrate through flesh and bone. These were the original runes, the patterns from which Odin himself had derived the lesser versions known to gods and mortals. Fundamental symbols that described reality itself, rather than merely representing sounds or concepts within it. To touch such runes was to connect momentarily with the underlying structure of existence, to feel the currents of power that flowed through all 9 worlds. The sensation was overwhelming, a rush of awareness too vast for any single consciousness to fully comprehend. Images flooded through the traveler's mind. Asgard's golden halls where Odin held council. Vanaheim's fertile fields where nature gods danced in eternal spring. Alfheim where light elves crafted beauty beyond mortal imagination. Svartalfheim where dark elves forged treasures of power and peril. Jotunheim's ice peaks where frost giants plotted ancient vengeance. Muspelheim where fire giants waited for their time of ascendance. Niflheim with its eternal mists concealing the beginnings of all things. Midgard where humankind struggled with their brief, vibrant lives. And Helheim, just departed, where the dead dwelled in pale reflection of life's complexity. The contact lasted only moments before the traveler pulled away, mind reeling from the vastness of perspective gained. Such knowledge was not meant to be held complete in any consciousness smaller than Yggdrasil itself. Yet fragments remained, understanding deeper than words, connections perceived rather than analyzed, wisdom that settled into the foundations of being rather than floating on the surface of thought. A sound drifted down from above, faint but distinct, a melody played on strings of wind or perhaps memory itself. The song was both new and ancient, its patterns complex, yet somehow instinctively understood. This was the music of the spheres, the harmony that bound the 9 worlds together despite their differences. Few living beings ever heard it clearly, though many sensed its echo in moments of profound insight or deep connection. The traveler paused to listen, knowing that this experience, above all others, would be among the first to fade upon return to the waking world. Such music was not meant for mortal memory to retain, existing as it did beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception. To hear it at all was rare fortune. To remember it would be near impossible. The melody seemed to respond to this attention, growing more defined as the traveler focused upon it. Individual voices became distinguishable within the greater harmony. A deep drone like massive tree trunks swaying in primordial wind. A cascading ripple reminiscent of starlight on water. A rhythmic pulsing that matched the cycle of seasons. Quick, bright notes that might have been the laughter of children or the calls of birds in spring forests. These separate strands wove together into a composition so perfect that it could only exist beyond the realm of conscious creation, an expression of the universe's inherent order. As the traveler stood, transfixed by this cosmic symphony, other senses began to perceive corresponding patterns. The mists around the path shifted and flowed in perfect synchronization with the music, forming shapes that lived for moments before dissolving back into formlessness. Light played through these formations, casting colors that seemed to exist nowhere in normal perception. Hues for which no mortal language had names. Tints that suggested emotions rather than wavelengths. The very air seemed charged with meaning, each breath drawing in not just sustenance for the body, but nourishment for awareness itself. Time lost its linear quality in this experience, stretching and compressing according to laws beyond ordinary understanding. What might have been moments or hours passed in perfect suspension, the traveler absorbed in perception that bridged the gap between objective observation and subjective participation. This was true vision, not merely seeing but being one with what was seen, not simply hearing but becoming part of the harmony perceived. Gradually, reluctantly, the traveler's consciousness began to separate from this profound unity, drawn back toward individuality by the soulmaker's insistent pulse. The return journey could not be delayed indefinitely. The window for crossing between worlds would not remain open forever. With effort that felt almost physical, attention was gathered back from its expansion, focusing once more on the path ahead and the purpose of ascent. The music did not cease as the traveler resumed walking, but it receded slightly, becoming again a backdrop rather than the central experience. It would remain as companion for the rest of the journey, though increasingly filtered through the limitations of ordinary perception as the waking world drew nearer. A curious phenomenon began to manifest as the path continued upward. Memories rose unbidden, not just from the recent journey through Helheim, but from the entirety of the traveler's existence. These were not the organized narrative recollections of conscious reminiscence, but fragmentary, vivid moments that appeared with the random intensity of lightning flashes. A childhood afternoon by a sun-dappled stream, the first taste of heartbreak's bitter sweetness, hands stained with soil from planting spring seeds, the weight of a loved one's head resting trustingly against a shoulder, the cold bite of fear before battle, the expansive warmth of shared laughter among friends. These memories emerge not as thoughts but as complete sensory experiences, as real in their momentary resurrection as when first lived. Each carried its emotional signature: joy, sorrow, love, anger, wonder, despair. Yet these feelings passed through without lingering, like weather patterns moving across an interior landscape. There was no judgment attached, no categorization of experiences as good or bad, simply acknowledgement of all that had shaped a single existence. This was not random recall, but part of Dreams Hollow's nature, its final gift to those returning to the waking world. In this place between realms, the entirety of a life could be perceived without the distortions of ego or the limitations of sequential thinking. The wholeness of being, usually fragmented by the mind's need to organize and evaluate, could be briefly glimpsed as a complete tapestry, each thread necessary, each pattern purposeful within the larger design. For the traveler, this panoramic review brought unexpected peace. Regrets lost their sharp edges when seen as essential components of growth. Joys gained deeper resonance when understood as counterpoints to sorrow. The artificial boundaries between success and failure, between wise and foolish choices, between meaningful and trivial moments, all dissolved in this comprehensive perspective. Every experience, every decision, every relationship had contributed to the consciousness that now made this extraordinary journey. As the path climbed higher, these memory flashes began to include glimpses of the underworld journey just completed, the bargain struck with pale hell in her half-lit hall, the crossing of Gjöll's sorrowful waters, encounters with shades who shared wisdom in exchange for news of the living world, the challenge of retained self-integrity in regions where identity naturally dissolved. These recent experiences, integrated with earlier memories, already being woven into the continuous tapestry of existence, rather than standing apart as something separate or other. The landscape through which the path now wound had changed significantly from the misty indeterminacy of lower regions. Distinct features had formed, massive trees with silver bark and leaves that shimmered between translucency and solidity, Open meadows where grass-like growth rippled in patterns too precise to be created by ordinary wind. Streams that flowed not with water but with liquid light that sang quietly to itself in voices just beyond comprehension. The sky above, for there was now definitively a sky rather than merely the absence of ground, showed depths of blue impossible in ordinary atmosphere, with occasional glimpses of what might have been stars or perhaps the distant fires of other worlds. The mists had not vanished entirely, but had transformed, becoming more like morning fog in a forest, tangible veils that draped between trees or collected in hollows, occasionally dancing upward in spiraling columns when disturbed by passing energies. Within these mist gatherings, shapes sometimes formed, faces half-remembered, figures engaged in activities partially glimpsed, scenes from stories or perhaps from lives being lived in distant realms of Yggdrasil's vast expanse. With the melody as companion, the journey continued upward, the path growing steadily brighter as though approaching daylight. The mists receded further, no longer swirling around in constant motion but settling into more stable patterns that resembled clouds seen from above. Through these breaks, tantalizing glimpses appeared, fragments of the other realms connected by Yggdrasil's vast expanse. There, a flash of golden spires might be Asgard catching morning light. There, a churning sea of clouds could mark the borders of Jotunheim. And there, a green-blue curve against darkness, perhaps Midgard itself, home of humankind, the destination that drew ever nearer. The path began to change beneath the traveler's feet, the silver mist solidifying into something more substantial, first resembling packed earth, then stone, then woody material like the bark of a living tree. The transition was happening, the return journey approaching its end. Soon, the veil between sleep and wakefulness would part entirely, and the wisdom gained in Helheim would transform into the language of dreams, filtered through the mind's need to create coherence from ineffable experience. With this physical transformation of the path came new companions to the journey. At first they appeared as merely darker patches in the surrounding mist, indistinct shapes that might have been tricks of perception, but as the traveler continued upward, these shapes resolved into more definite forms. Shadow beings that walked parallel to the path, never quite approaching, but clearly aware of the traveler's presence. These were not the dead souls of Helheim, nor the dream fragments of the Between Place, but something else entirely. Guardian entities that dwelled permanently in the borderlands between worlds. The ancient Norse called them fylgjur, though other cultures had given them different names. Spirit guides, guardian angels, totem beings, higher selves. They existed outside of ordinary time, connecting past and future with the eternal present, accompanying mortal lives while remaining fundamentally separate from them. The closest of these beings gradually took on more specific form as the traveler acknowledged its presence. A massive wolf with fur that shifted between deepest black and silver white, eyes that held wisdom beyond animal nature but respected the boundaries of mortal comprehension. It matched the traveler's pace precisely, moving with fluid grace through mist that seemed to part before its passage. No words passed between mortal and guardian. None were necessary in this place where communication transcended language. Instead, a sense of recognition flowed between them, acknowledgement of paths shared across multiple lifetimes, of guidance offered and sometimes heeded, of protection given within the limits of cosmic law that preserved free will above all else. The Wolf Guardian was joined by others as the ascent continued. a raven whose wings left momentary script in the air when it passed through mist, an ancient warrior figure whose armor changed style and origin with each glimpse, a woman whose age shifted between maiden and crone, between one step and the next. These were aspects of guidance, representations of wisdom accumulated and assistance offered throughout a life's journey. They did not speak, these guardians, yet their presence conveyed messages nonetheless. Approval for the courage shown in the underworld journey, caution about carrying death's wisdom too openly in the land of the living, reassurance that the difficult path had been necessary, promise of continued guidance in the life to come. Most importantly, they offered confirmation that the traveler had not been fundamentally changed by the descent into Helheim. Transformed, yes, but not diminished, not corrupted by contact with realms beyond normal experience. As the path grew more substantial beneath the traveler's feet, these guardian presences began to withdraw, fading gradually back into the mists from which they had emerged. Their departure was not abandonment, but transition. Their influence would continue in the waking world, though perceived more subtly there, felt as intuition or unexpected insight, rather than seen as distinct entities. The last to depart was the wolf, its intelligent gaze holding the travelers for a final moment of connection, before it turned and loped away into thickening mist, its form dissolving until only the gleam of eyes remained visible, then nothing at all. Yet the sense of its continuing presence lingered, a reassurance that some connections transcended the boundaries between worlds. Now the path ascended more steeply, requiring genuine physical effort for the first time since the journey began. Muscles long dormant awakened to necessity, breath quickened with exertion, heart beat more strongly within the chest. These physiological responses served as anchors, drawing consciousness more firmly into the body, preparing for complete return to the waking world. The landscape continued its transformation toward greater solidity and definition. Trees now stood as distinct entities with individual characteristics rather than archetypical forms. Rocks showed specific textures, some smooth with age, others jagged from recent formation. The ground between path and forest developed complexity. Patches of moss, scattered fallen leaves, occasional flowers whose colors seemed extraordinarily vivid after the muted palette of underworld realms. Above, the sky deepened from the indeterminate luminescence of Dream's Hollow toward a more defined blue, though still unlike any ordinary sky. Across this expanse drifted clouds, with purpose to their patterns, forming shapes that suggested both natural phenomena and deliberate communication. A ship with full sails, a hand reaching downward, a tree spreading branches, a face in profile whose features resembled no one and everyone. The air itself gained substance and character, no longer the neutral medium of the between place, but something with presence and variation. In some places it hung still and heavy with the scent of earth and growing things. In others, it moved in currents that carried hints of distant places. Sea salt, mountain stone, meadow flowers, forest loam. These changing qualities created a sensory map overlay atop the visual landscape, adding depth to orientation beyond what eyes alone could perceive. But sounds, too, became more varied and specific, no longer merely the cosmic music that continued as distant backdrop, but individual notes of a world awakening to consciousness, water moving over stone in a pattern that almost formed words, leaves rustling with messages both random and purposeful, occasional calls of unseen creatures that might have been birds, but resonated with more complex meaning than simple animal communication. These sensory experiences flooded in with increasing intensity as the boundary between dreaming and waking thinned further. The mind struggled to process this abundance after the relative austerity of Helheim and the filtered perceptions of Dream's Hollow. It was like moving from a space where everything had been carefully curated and distilled to its essence into an environment of overwhelming multiplicity where no single focus could be maintained for long. A gentle breeze touched the traveler's face, the first true physical sensation since passing through the hollow gate. With it came sense of life, green growing things, morning dew, the subtle complexity of air moved by wind rather than the static atmosphere of underworld realms. The body responded instinctively, lungs expanding to draw deeper breath, skin awakening to sensation after the numbing cold of death's domain. The soul maimer's light began to fade, its purpose nearly fulfilled. Soon it would vanish entirely, returning to Helheim as part of the balance between giving and taking, between knowledge gained and price paid. The traveler looked at it one last time, memorizing its gentle glow, the warmth that had guided through the darkest passages of the underworld. "Thank you," the traveler whispered to the fading light, words that encompassed gratitude, not just for guidance, but for transformation itself. In response, the marker pulsed once more, bright and clear, before dissolving into motes of light that spiraled upward and vanished into the brightening sky. The path ended abruptly at the base of what appeared to be an enormous tree trunk, not a root of Yggdrasil this time, but a true gateway between worlds. Its bark spiraled in complex patterns that seemed to shift when not observed directly, forming doorways that opened and closed like breathing lungs. This was the final threshold, the last transition point before complete return to the waking world. Before approaching this last barrier, the traveler turned to look back at the path traveled. Dream's Hollow stretched away into distance, its silver mists now illuminated from above by what seemed like approaching dawn. The drifting lights still moved in their silent patterns, some drawing nearer to watch this departure from their between place. And there, at the furthest visible point, where mist thickened into impenetrable cloud, stood a figure, tall and straight, half in shadow and half in light. Though too distant for features to be discerned, the traveler knew without doubt that Hel herself watched this departure from her realm. Her permission made this return possible. Her bargain allowed wisdom to travel from death back to life. The traveler raised one hand in salute, not submission, not gratitude exactly, but acknowledgement of compact fulfilled, of balance maintained between their realms. The distant figure inclined her head slightly in response, the gesture barely perceptible across the expanse, before turning and fading into the mists of her domain. It was time. The final doorway awaited, pulsing gently with inner light that seemed to match the rhythm of a heartbeat. The traveler's own heart, beating stronger now as life called more insistently. With deliberate steps, the threshold was approached, hands reaching out to touch the living wood of the barrier between worlds. The door recognized its approach, spiraling open like the pupil of an enormous eye adjusting to light. Beyond lay not darkness, but brilliance. Not the harsh glare of midday sun, but the gentle illumination of dawn, of awakening, of return. The traveler stepped forward, passing through the final gate. The world shifted once more, reality rearranging itself around this transitional moment. The sensations came in waves, warmth against skin, softness supporting tired limbs, the subtle sound of breathing, one's own breath, steady and deep. These were the anchors of the physical world, the touchstones of waking existence that had seemed so distant during the journey through death's realm. Consciousness expanded outward from these simple physical awareness, memories of the underworld journey already beginning their transformation. The profound revelations of Helheim were shifting, rearranging themselves into symbols and metaphors that the waking mind could process and contain. The raw truth of death's wisdom, too potent for living thought to hold unchanged, filtered through layers of consciousness, becoming the language of dreams rather than the stark dialect of mortality's end. Yet, something essential remained intact. Not specific knowledge, perhaps, but understanding that ran deeper than words could express. The traveler had walked the 9 paths, had stood before hell in her half-light throne room, had bargained for wisdom and paid its price in full. That experience had changed the very fabric of being, altering perception in ways that would unfold gradually in the days and years to come. As dawn's light grew stronger, as the boundary between sleeping and waking thinned to transparency, one final vision formed in the mind's eye, a last gift from Dream's Hollow before its doorways closed completely. The vision began as a single point of golden light, pulsing gently like a distant star. This point expanded outward, not merely growing larger, but unfolding in multiple dimensions simultaneously, revealing complexity beyond ordinary perception. Layers upon layers manifested, each more intricate than the last, until a structure of breathtaking beauty and impossible intricacy spread through the entirety of awareness. In this vision, Yggdrasil stood revealed in its entirety, its vast structure connecting all realms of existence in patterns too complex for any single consciousness to fully comprehend. The 9 worlds hung among its branches like jewels, each with its own nature, its own purpose in the greater design, and running through all, connecting everything in patterns of light and meaning, were the threads of fate, the weaving of the Norns, who sat at the base of the world tree, recording what had been, what was, and what must someday come to pass. Asgard gleamed at the highest point, its golden halls reflecting light that seemed to originate from within the realm itself, rather than from any external source. Here gods moved in stately patterns, their forms immense, yet precisely defined, their actions sending ripples through the fabric of reality that affected all other realms in subtle but profound ways. Odin could be glimpsed seated upon Hylskalf, his all-seeing throne, one eye gazing outward at the multiplicity of creation, while the other, long sacrificed, looked inward toward mysteries even the Allfather could not fully articulate. Nearby hung Vanaheim, lush with perpetual growth and vibrant life force. Here the Vanir, old gods of fertility and natural cycles, danced in celebration of existence itself. Their movements created harmonies that resonated through Yggdrasil's branches, maintaining balances essential to the continuation of all life. Their realms shimmered with constant change yet remained fundamentally stable, embodying the paradox of renewal within continuity. Alfheim glowed with soft radiance, home to the Light Elves, whose artistry shaped beauty from raw potential. Their delicate architecture rose in impossible configurations that somehow expressed fundamental truths about the universe's structure. Music visible as patterns of colored light flowed through their domain, creating and dissolving forms that could be perceived simultaneously as mathematical equations, philosophical propositions, and emotional expressions of profound depth. Below these elevated realms, suspended at Yggdrasil's midpoint, Midgard appeared, the realm of humankind. smaller than the divine domains, yet intricate beyond measure in its constant flux of possibility. Countless lives unfolded there, in patterns that echoed the larger movements of gods and cosmic forces, while maintaining their own unique trajectory. From this perspective, the brevity of mortal existence revealed its purpose. Each life a concentrated experiment in experience, a focused exploration of potentials that longer-lived beings could only examine through extended, deluded awareness. Jotunheim spread vast and rugged, the realm of giants, whose ancient knowledge predated even the gods. Their massive forms moved with deliberate slowness through landscapes of primal power. Towering mountains, bottomless chasms, forests of trees tall as Midgard's highest peaks. Though often cast as antagonists in the tales of gods, from this perspective, their essential role in the cosmic balance became clear. They were the necessary counterweight to divine order, the embodiment of creative chaos without which stagnation would overtake all existence. Svartalfheim lay partially hidden, its labyrinthine depths home to the dark elves, whose craftsmanship rivaled that of the dwarves, though serving different purposes. Their realm pulsed with secret knowledge, with magics both subtle and profound, that worked upon the very foundations of reality. Unlike their light-dwelling kin, they sought not beauty for its own sake, but power derived from understanding the shadow aspects of existence. Not evil by nature, but essential explorers of dimensions other beings feared to acknowledge. Deeper still lay Nidavellir, domain of the dwarves, master crafters whose forges produced wonders that transcended the boundaries between artistry and magic. Their halls honeycombed the roots of Yggdrasil itself, their constant industry maintaining aspects of the world tree's structure that might otherwise falter. Though seldom leaving their underground kingdom, their influence spread throughout all realms through the artifacts they created. Tools and weapons and adornments that channeled powers otherwise inaccessible to their users. Near the base of the world tree's massive trunk, Muspelheim blazed with primordial fire. Not the flames of ordinary combustion, but the original creative force from which all energy derived. Fire giants moved through this incandescent realm, their forms constantly shifting between solid matter and pure flame. Their nature was not destruction for its own sake, but transformation, the breaking down of existing forms to enable new creation. This was the cosmic forge where future possibilities were smelted from the raw materials of present reality. Opposite this realm of fire, Niflheim spread an eternal mist, the primordial cold that balanced heat's expansive tendency. Here, ice giants maintained the equal necessity of consolidation, of drawing inward, of preserving form against the constant pressure of change. Their realm was not death, but suspended animation, the cosmic storehouse where potential waited for appropriate conditions before manifesting. Without this counterbalance to Muspelheim's constant burning, all would be consumed in uncontrolled transformation. And at the lowest level, partially hidden by Yggdrasil's massive roots, Helheim waited in twilight illumination, not as place of punishment, but as necessary completion of life's cycle. Hel herself could be glimpsed moving among the quiet shades of the dead, her divided form a visual representation of existence's dual nature. Here all journeys ended, yet from this ending new beginnings became possible, for death was not annihilation but transition, the release of essence from form to enable new configurations of being. Connecting all these realms, flowing through Yggdrasil's living wood, ran the waters of the Well of Erd. Source of all waters, throughout the 9 worlds and repository of all wisdom gained through experience. Beside this well sat the 3 Norns, Erd of the past, Verdandi of the present, Skuld of the future, weaving the great tapestry of fate from threads that connected every being throughout all realms. Their work was not predestination in the sense of fixed outcomes, but rather the maintenance of pattern within which infinite variations might unfold, the establishment of consequences without which choice would have no meaning. Most wondrous of all revealed aspects was Yggdrasil itself, not merely a connection between separate realms, but a living entity of which all realms were expressions. Its consciousness operated on a scale beyond comprehension, each leaf a world of possibility, each branch a timeline of development, its entire being both container and content of all existence. The world tree suffered and endured, grew and transformed, maintained and created in one continuous, eternal process that encompassed both the smallest quantum fluctuation and the grandest cosmic cycle. The vision expanded further, revealing that Yggdrasil itself was but one tree in a greater forest, one pattern in an infinite tapestry of being. Beyond the 9 worlds lay others. Beyond this cycle of existence stretched cycles without number. The boundaries that seemed so fixed, between life and death, between mortal and divine, between one realm and another, were revealed as more permeable than imagined, more mutable than the gods themselves might acknowledge. And at the heart of this infinite complexity lay a simple truth, the kernel of wisdom that hell had permitted the traveler to bring back across the threshold. All things connected, all beings participated in a shared existence that transcended individual form or function. The separation that caused such suffering, the isolation that drove mortals to desperate acts and gods to jealous wrath, was illusion born of limited perception. This was the gift and the burden of the Underworld journey, to see beyond the veil, to recognize the unity beneath apparent division, to know that death was not ending but transformation, that loss opened pathways to new beginnings, that the cycle continued beyond perception but never truly outside understanding for those willing to walk the difficult roads. The vision began to fade as wakefulness approached, its profound revelations already transforming into dream symbols, into intuition rather than direct knowledge. This too was part of the bargain with hell. Direct memory of death's domain could not survive unchanged in the realm of the living, but its essence would remain, working beneath conscious thought like water shaping stone, gradually revealing through living action what could not be fully contained in waking memory. The mists of dreams hollow dispersed entirely, replaced by the familiar sensations of physical existence. The journey completed its circle, the traveler returning to the very point of departure, yet fundamentally changed by the path traveled. What had begun in desperate seeking concluded in quiet understanding. What had started as flight from fear ended as movement toward acceptance. Sleep released its hold gently, consciousness expanding into the fullness of waking perception. The details of the underworld journey receded like tide from shore, leaving behind only fragmentary images, hell's mismatched gaze, the glowing soul marker, the silver path through mists where memory and possibility intertwined. These would surface occasionally in quiet moments, in dreams, in the spaces between thoughts, offering glimpses of wisdom too profound for words to adequately contain. The room materialized around the awakening traveler. Familiar walls, window where morning light filtered through thin curtains. Everyday objects restored to their proper significance after absence. The ordinary world made extraordinary by return. by the simple miracle of continuation after confronting its opposite. A deep breath filled lungs that remembered the cold air of Helheim, the silver mists of Dream's Hollow. A stretch extended limbs that had walked paths few living beings ever traversed. A moment of orientation placed this awakening body within the context of ongoing life, a life now enriched rather than diminished by its brief sojourn into death's domain. The journey had ended where it began, the circle completed, yet nothing remained unchanged. Nothing could be as it was before crossing the threshold of the Hollow Gate. Death's wisdom, carried back into life, would manifest not in words or conscious memory, but in how one walked through the world henceforth, with deeper compassion born of shared connection, with greater acceptance of life's cycles, with recognition of patterns that extended beyond individual existence. As the new day beckoned, as ordinary activities awaited, the traveler rose to meet them, carrying invisibly the mark of Helheim's touch, hearing distantly the echo of Dream's hollow melodies, seeing occasionally through the veil that separated the worlds. These gifts, purchased at significant cost, would unfold their value gradually across remaining days, illuminating the path forward with wisdom born of darkness traversed and transcended. The return was complete, the journey continued. Our Viking tale has now concluded. You will now hear the peaceful sounds of a crackling fire and gentle ambient noises that will continue throughout the night without any interruptions, helping you drift into a deep and restful sleep. May the stars of the northern sky watch over you, and may you find peaceful rest until the morning light. Sleep well, and good night.